Story number 1. My boyfriend says he's disgusted by me after I gained weight. I'm honestly so heartbroken right now, and I don't know what to do. I up to 6 have been with my boyfriend M28 for years, and up until recently, I thought we had a really solid relationship. But the past few months have been tough on me. I've been dealing with a lot of stress from work, some family stuff, and, to be honest, I've let my health slip a bit. I've gained about 20 pounds. And while I know I don't look the same as I used to, I didn't think it would be this big of a deal. Last night, he sat me down for what he called a serious talk. I was expecting something about our plans for the holidays or maybe something about his job, but no. He told me, straight up, that he finds me physically disgusting now. His exact words were, "I'm not attracted to you anymore because you've let yourself go." I was stunned. I felt like someone punched me in the gut. He went on to say that he's been trying to be patient, but he can't ignore it anymore, and he misses how I used to look. Then he suggested that I get back to the gym and start taking care of myself because otherwise, he doesn't know if he can stay in this relationship long term. I didn't even know how to respond. I just sat there in shock while he lectured me about how I've changed. He made it sound like I'm a completely different person just because I've gained a bit of weight. It's not like I've given up on myself completely. I still dress nicely, do my makeup, and try to take care of myself. But apparently, none of that matters if the number on the scale goes up. The worst part, I feel like I can't even talk to anyone about this because I'm so embarrassed. My friends would 100% tell me to dump him. But it's not that simple. I love him, and this is the first time he's ever said anything like this. But now I can't help but wonder, has he been secretly judging me this whole time? Has every bite of food I've eaten in front of him been analyzed? I feel so torn. Part of me wants to fight for this relationship and prove that I can get back to who I was, but another part of me is furious that I even feel like I have to. I thought he loved me for who I am, not just how I look. Am I being too sensitive about this? Is this something we can work through? Or is it a sign that he doesn't actually love me the way I thought he did? I just feel so lost and hurt, and I don't know what to do. Story number 2. My dad went bear hunting, but what he saw wasn't a bear. This story takes place in the autumn of 1977 at a camp that belonged to a friend of my father named David. Dad worked with David at one of the automobile factories owned by General Motors in Michigan. David had a camp in a swampy area in the UP Upper Peninsula of Michigan and had agreed to let my dad bear hunt out of it. Dad wasn't alone in this bear hunting trip. His fellow companions were his wife Samantha, little sister Whitney, and her husband Clive, and his hunting buddy Randy. There are many stories I could tell you about, but I will refrain. Both he and Randy brought their bear hounds with them, as that is how they hunted the renowned Michigan black bear. The hounds pick up a scent and run the bear until it trees, and then the hunters move into the tree for the kill. My father has been very successful hunting this black marauder of the UP. He has bear skins and mounts to prove it. This story is transcribed from my dad telling it, so it's written as if he's actively telling the story in real time. The actual text of this story was typed down by my half-brother from a video I took of my dad telling this story. He then had it printed into a little book that he gave to my dad for his birthday. I then used Google Lens to copy-paste the text since I didn't have a digital copy. I will be altering names and locations. It was in September. Bear season opened September 10th, and we were up for a 2-week hunt. We had gone out bear hunting that morning, and we run a bear, but we didn't get it. So, we went back to the camp. There was me, Clive, Whitney, and Samantha. Me, and Randy, and Clive were sitting there, and we got up and started a fire. It was about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the evening. We just sat around chit-chatting. The girls were in the cabin making dinner from a raccoon Randy had shot the day before. We fed our hounds, and just before the girls called us in. It was getting a little dusky. Every one of my dogs, I had 5 dogs tied up around the edge of the swamp, and Randy had 4 dogs in a dog pen. All at once my 5 dogs jumped up and went right to the end of their chain and started barking and growling and snarling and looking down in that swamp. We were looking down there and couldn't see anything, and all at once, I'm telling ya, every dog but one went back to the tree I had them tied to and laid down except one. They were all shaking and shivering except for one dog, that little shotgun. She was my little blue tick hound. She finally laid down, but she didn't act so scared as the others. Every one of Randy's dogs ran right in their doghouse. They were in a pen. It was weird. I mean, a really weird ordeal. I couldn't figure it out. If it had been a bear, they wouldn't have acted like that. They would have wanted to chase him. We went in and had dinner. Then we went back out that night and talked about the events of the day around a fire. The girls made dessert and called us in. So we went in and played cards. We played euchre. That's what we play in Michigan. It was real warm in September, and it was a real hot day. And after we got done playing cards, we all got ready for bed. It was about 11 o'clock. We left the back door open because it was so hot. We never thought about latching the screen door. It was a screen door with a hook on it. So we went to bed, and at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard that screen door open. I heard it open and thump shut, and I heard something stirring in the kitchen, and the way the cabin was situated, it was just 2 rooms. It had a big room, and the dining room, living room, and kitchen was all one room. It had a big picture window, and it had a table in front of the picture window. And there was no electricity, so it had a gas lantern or gas lights hanging from the ceiling. It had 9-foot ceilings, and it hung down about a foot or so. About 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a full moon, and that cabin was really lit up, and it was facing east, and the full moon was shining real bright into the kitchen. There was a full-size bunk bed, and Randy was in the top bunk, and Samantha and I were in the bottom. You could see almost like daylight in the kitchen. All at once, I could hear something moving around, and then it walked right in front of that table, and turned just like it knew right where we were. It turned right around, and looked. It was standing right under the light, and it was humped over, so it wouldn't hit its head on the light. I remember his arms hanging down. They seemed like they were way past his knees, because he was leaning down bent over. And he was just standing there staring at us, and he would look over at Whitney and Clive. They were in a day bed, and we were in the bunk bed. He'd look over at them, and look over at us. He looked right at me, and then I raised up on one elbow, and was watching him, and I thought at first it was a bear, you know? Then I realized, it couldn't be because its ears, I could see them real plain, were on the side of its head like a human, not on the top like a bear. And he just stood there staring, and then he'd look up, and then look down at me, and then back at Whitney and Clive. They had a window right beside their bed, and light was coming in there. He just stood there staring at us, and I said, "Oh Lord, I didn't know. Every one of our guns were out. We always leave them in the trucks." We never had a gun in the cabin, which was probably a good thing. If I had turned on the flashlight, we all might have got killed. I laid there, and he kept looking at me, and then he would look at them, but he would just stand there. He would move his head and shift himself, but then he would just keep staring at us. And my dogs were just out there whinnying and carrying on, you know, scared to death. If it would have been a bear, they would have been going nuts, but they were just whinnying out there. And I remembered I had a big 8-cell battery flashlight that we would sit between the bunk bed and the day bed. Was there just in case someone had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, they could just reach down there and get that light. They could go out, and I reached, and it wasn't anywhere around, and I thought, what in the world? It was always there. I was gonna turn it on, because I wanted to know exactly what it was. I didn't know whether Whitney had gotten it, and went out earlier to go to the bathroom, and didn't put it back, or what, because it was always put in that one spot. And he watched me while I was reaching around, you know? He just stood there watching, and then I just thought, well, we were all Christians, so if he attacks we would all go to heaven. He stood between us and the only door out of the cabin. We would have had to go through him, or around him. There was no other way out of there. I started breakfast while the others woke up. We had eggs, potatoes, and some kind of meat. I started it, but the girls finished macking it. While they finished macking breakfast, I put the dogs in the dog boxes on my truck. I don't think I had the tracking collars at that time. After breakfast, about 5:30 a.m. we all headed out. Whitney and Clive were in their truck, and the rest were with me in my truck. David had a cable across his drive, and after we got through the cable and down the trail about 300 yards, I got my dog sport out. I would always put one dog down out in front of the truck. I just drive slow behind him, and he goes down the trail winding, and when he smells a bear he starts barking. He would go after the bear, and I would jump out of the truck and get the other dogs out and send them after him. And we took out down this one trail, and he acted squirrely, like he didn't want to be out. He usually would drift back and forth, this time stayed right in front of the truck. He would go down a ways, and he'd stop and look back, but he wasn't drifting back and forth, he was as just nervous as a cat. We went out. It's about 2.5 to 3 miles to the west out to the highway on a little to track back to the cabin. We made it all the way out to the highway, and I got him and loaded him back into the truck. Then we went south on the highway toward town about 3/4 of a mile and turned left on a trail that headed toward the lake. And there is a big wild cherry orchard, and the bears just love them cherries. That time of the year they are dead ripe. I went over to the cherry orchard and took Sport all through that. We almost always would start a bear in there, and he just didn't act right. So I loaded him back up in the truck. And we went back down the road and turned south about 1/8 of a mile to another little trail. When we went, there is a little lake that I mentioned before, about a 25 acre lake. We went up and around, because it gets hilly, that lake, and there is a little trail that goes all the way across about 3 miles across the road behind us, the south side of the road. I loaded him up and drove northeast around the lake, got him out and put him down, and he's doing pretty good. He's winding and going down the trail, and he stopped. There's a little foot trail that went off that trail, and he started down that foot trail, and I thought he winded a bear. So, in the meantime, I'm sitting on the hood of the truck so I can watch him better, and Samantha was driving the truck. So, I had her stop, and I slid off the truck, and I'm walking, and Sport goes down this trail, and I walk down the trail behind him. And he's coming, and the trail follows a ridge, and the trail comes to a point, and it's on the back side of that lake. And that swamp ran all the way from the cabin down to the lake and across. It had to be 5 miles across that swamp. But anyway, I followed him all the way to the end of that trail, and he comes out to the end of that point, and then the trail dropped into the lake. It was a game trail, and he came to the end of that point, and threw his nose up in the air, and just stopped, and he just froze staring down at the lake. And he kind of growled a little bit, and all the hair jumped up, I mean all of his hair, and the day was just breaking day good, and his hair jumped up from his tail to his nose. I mean it just bristled right up, and he just stood there staring down in there, and I'm looking down in there, and I can't see anything. But he was windin', and he might have saw the creature. He looked at me, and he just turned around and started back out that trail, just stiff-legged and kind of trottin'. And I following him walking just as hard as I can go, and I know something bad. He saw something bad. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I know if it had been a bear, Sport would have went right down there after it, but he didn't. He headed right back to the truck, and when we got close to the truck, he took off running and jumped right into the truck and run right to the dog box. He was trying to get in the dog box. I opened the dog box and he ran in and laid right down, with his head down, just laying there. I still hadn't told Randy and them anything about the night before. I shut the dog box and shut the tailgate. I got in the truck and drove back down the trail toward the road. We used to check it first in the morning because it had a lot of cherries off through there too. I figured we would strike a bear through there. Anyways, we went about 3/4 of a mile down the trail, and we had another couple of miles to get out to the end, and I had Samantha stop, and I got Sport back out of the dog box. He didn't want to get out very bad. I got him out, and he started down the trail, but he wasn't acting right. So, I let out my little blue tick female named Rose that would stay right with him. The other dogs wouldn't, but she would. Anyway, I let Rose out, put her out with him, and he started acting a little better because she was out there with him. I jumped on the hood, and Samantha started driving. Sport went down the trail about another half a mile, and threw his head in the air, and started howling. He could smell a bear. Rose couldn't smell it, but he had a better nose than her. I had Samantha stop the truck, and I got 3 other dogs out, Shotgun, Tennessee and Joe, and I was holding them. Sport and Rose went across, and when I heard Rose start howling, I knew it was a pretty good track, so I turned all the dogs in with them. Randy never turned any of his dogs out. They ran across the ridge, and the bear was jumped. They ran about a half a mile, and treed the bear. It was a sow and a cub that was about 1.5 years old cub, and me and Clive went to the tree. I said, "Clive, grab your gun." He got his 30-30 Marlin out of the case and loaded it, and we started into the tree. The dogs were just hammering that tree. Anyways, the cub for some reason jumped out of the tree and took off running. My lead dog, Sport, seen it jump and went after it. Well, when he went, it pulled every dog to run with him because he was running hot and hard. Me and Clive were probably halfway to M, and that sow got nervous and came out of the tree so Clive didn't get to shoot her. Anyway, the dogs run. Every one of them was running, and there was a guy up there we knew named Eon. He asked me when we was out hunting once that if the dogs run a bear by him, was it all right for him to shoot it? He was a nice guy, so I said, "No, I don't mind it. Just let me know, because I would like to take pictures of the dogs with it." The dogs were running, and I heard a gun go off, and then I heard another shot, and we headed toward the dogs. We hollered for the others to bring the trucks, and we got over there 'cause the dogs were still barking, and Ian had shot that bear. So we got pictures with it, and after that, when we got done hunting that day, and got back to camp that evening, I told Whitney and all of them what had happened the night before. Whitney wanted to go home, and I said, it never bothered us. It came in the cabin, but we'll make sure we shut the doors now. It never did bother us, it just stood there looking at us. Anyway, we stayed up there. We had another full week to hunt. He was just observing us, he never bothered us, and I never bothered him. If I would have turned on that flashlight, there is no telling what might have happened. So then, anyway, it was for months later that there was a Bigfoot sighting of him crossing the road about 6 to 7 miles from where I had saw him. There was a car coming from the north and another one coming from the south, and they slowed right down, and he came up out of the ditch. He crossed right over the road and went down the other side. He didn't run, and they said it was Bigfoot. That's the whole story of it. Whether or not this creature was actually Bigfoot, I don't know. All I know is, something was in that cabin with my dad that wasn't human. My dad always swore that this story is true. He has since passed, but he never recanted this story. I believe him. I guess it's up to you if you want to believe or not.